Hello, everyone. Welcome to Rash's World. Today we have a special guest, Jerry Dale. How are we doing?
I'm good. I'm good. How you doing today?
Pretty good. Thanks so much. So my first question is usually the toughest. How would you briefly describe yourself to our audience here in your own words, however you see fit?
Just a small town country boy, moved to the city. Love music. I love God, have grown to love God more. Um, and just out here in the world trying to navigate and be a father and raise some kids.
Wonderful. That's a great introduction. So we're going to talk about your book, and your book is Music, Porn, and Jesus, A Journey to Redemption. Now, never thought of saying music, porn, and Jesus in the same sentence, let alone find it in a book title. So I said, I have to talk to Jerry Dale. So what's that all about?
Yeah, so so I spent a decade in the music industry. I was a label rep for Sony Music in the 90s. And then I spent a decade in the adult entertainment industry and I produced like the Adult Entertainment Awards. And then I worked for two of the largest adult clubs in the city of Dallas, but also in the state of Texas.
Okay.
And then after that, I spent a little time doing some consultant work with small businesses, just kind of helping them move from one stage to the next. And then after that, after um, I had a bypass, a quadruple bypass,
Okay.
and after that, I started seminary. So yeah, music, porn, and Jesus. That's literally my journey.
Okay, great. You worked with, if my notes are correct, with Will Smith and Snoop Dogg.
I did. I have.
Oh, awesome.
So in the 90s, when I was at Sony Music, and so we had two labels. We had Epic and Columbia, and they were the number one and number two record labels in the world at the time. And so we had artists we had Will Smith, we had Destiny's Child, I had
Oh,
Ricky
awesome.
Martin, I had Celine Dion, Jennifer Lopez, Jagged Edge, Maxwell. We had a list of artists. So I was more urban music,
Mhm.
but everybody worked like a Mariah Carey and a Celine Dion and the Dixie Chicks, even though they were country, but everybody in the company worked those particular artists as well.
So, what was this life of success like? I mean, obviously, you had a lot of success first year with in the music industry. What did it feel like? What are some of the positive effects? I think most people know, but what are some of the negative effects too when you look back, basically? And this is your memoir, right? You look back at those moments.
Is Yeah. So looking back, I was young when I
Mhm.
got into the music industry. I was in my 20s.
Mhm.
That was in the 90s. And I didn't understand, and I talk about this in the book a lot too.
Mhm.
I didn't understand 'cause before I was at Sony, I worked for Luke, Two Crew, right? Uncle Luke. And so there was things that as a 20-year-old, I saw women do with their bodies that at 20 years old, it was cool then, right? But when I look back, I see how it shaped my marriage. I see how it shaped how I viewed women. I see how it just shaped some of those things. Even though I had a very strong and I respected my mom and my grandma, right? I spent a lot of time with them. I mean, my father was still my mom and my dad were still together, but even though I had those two women in my life, I still was shaped differently because of being in the industry. So there's that. And then also, just the type of person that I am, being a go-getter and alpha, I always had to have the what in the book I call it that guy. I think it's like chapter 5 or 6, right? And
Mhm.
so I always had to have access to everything. So whenever the artist came into town, I literally could get them anything they wanted. And so I would always say like one of my superpowers was being able to get them anything after hours, right? You get
Mhm.
alcohol, I can get you whatever you wanted after hours. And and as I look back now, like a lot of those things put me in situations where I was dealing with a lot of shady people.
Mhm.
I would be out late at night. when I was with my first marriage, I was married twice. In my first marriage, I had infidelity in my marriage. I mean, so
Mhm.
I just did things. I was, again, I was in my 20s, no excuse for it, but I'm just telling you that's just things that
It's like
happen.
a vortex, right? There's a push and pull, and you're kind of drawn into it. It's really hard to resist too, because it is very tempting of, having access, seeing that. So I was
Yeah.
wondering, like the artists that you're dealing with, like we feel like this is like their show, but whether like this in real life as well, because I just sometimes think it's exaggerated when you look at certain types of songs and so on and music. But is it embodied? And somebody like Snoop Dogg, I think, is the same way he sings his stuff, so there's not much of a discrepancy, but is there difference between the artist and the real life person, or are they one and the same thing in your experience?
I would tell you that 80 to 90% of it is one and the same thing.
Okay.
A lot
And that
of
can be troubling when you look at what some
Yes.
people are saying, right?
Yes, yes,
Yeah.
yes, yes. When you look back, there are some parts, some of what they're doing is, especially like a Snoop Dogg in terms of with him being in the rap side of it. Some of it is, they're good storytellers, right?
Mhm,
So
exactly.
there's always going to be some adjectives. There's always going to be some things in there that's going to make the story a little bit better.
Yeah.
But the meat of the story, for the most part, is truth, and it's things that they've either seen or been in or been involved in or have been around. Some of those things I never thought I would see. Never envisioned it as a kid growing up, right? That you would
Mhm.
see those things. But then when I look back, I'm like, how was I involved in this? But then it's like, just like you said, there's that push and pull with it, right? It's like a vortex. You get pulled in and you don't even realize this
Mhm.
is what's actually happening until it's actually happening.
It's like the frog in the boiling water, right? It keeps increasing and you take it as normal and you
Yes,
accept it. And now a lot of things is coming out too. A lot of the horrible stuff that goes on is coming to light, with how things are evolving. And I think that's great. People need to
yes,
talk about it, be open, and there needs to be justice there too. Of like, even if you're famous, there are certain things, there are limits, certain things you can't
yes.
do, you shouldn't do, right? As well.
Yeah, and there should be limits, right?
Mhm.
And you want to be morally correct in certain areas, and you want to do, what's right. At least I always did. And I think, when I look back, I would say God always had a hand on me. He held me anchored. He never let me go
Mhm.
too far off the reservation, right? Because there were some things that I knew growing up I just couldn't do. There's
Yeah.
some things that I knew. One, I didn't want to disappoint my parents, right? And
Yeah.
then two, I knew that if I went here, there wasn't going to be any help for me, you know what I'm saying, from my parents,
Mhm.
right? So there's
Mhm.
just some things I knew I couldn't do. And I'm grateful that God allowed me to not be able to get into some things, right? But
Yeah.
there was a lot that still shaped the way I did things, the way I raised kids. I look back and sometimes just having so much um just being in that culture, and always going. I mean, we would be at lunch. I would go to church, take my family to church. We
Yeah.
leave church, go for a Sunday lunch, right? Or dinner, however you want to call it. And I would get a call, a money call, and I would take the call and I'd be on the phone on a Sunday taking a call because I'm trying to, get that money or whatever the case is. And that was time I should have been spending with my family. And it was at least quality time I should have been because I was away 6 days a week anyway, right? So
Mhm.
then that
Mhm.
one day I'm still gone.
Yeah, that's they being completely overworked there and not like and having time for the really important stuff, the family, right?
Yes,
I think,
yes,
and it's also there's no limits and there's like excess throughout the culture
yes,
of excess, and you see it with billionaires who want more money, and I'm like at some point just just chill, relax, enjoy what you
yes.
have. But it seems like you keep pushing forward and you keep like kind of trying to like push the boundaries of what can I get away with, especially when you reach fame. So there's that dark side to fame as well, where you think you're kind of invincible, you can do whatever you want, and which is not good or true.
Yes, you said it exactly. I mean, that's exactly what happens. That's what happens to people. You're in there and it's I would tell you this, it's a progression, right?
Mhm, mhm,
And it's, when I was when I was in the clubs, there were girls that would come in and they would just want to be a waitress. That's all they wanted to do, right? Come in, they just want to be a waitress during their own day shift, right? They want to be a waitress and they would come in and just want to serve. And then they would see the other girls, the dancers, they would see how they would make more money, but just sitting there with the guy or whatever, right? Or maybe they get up and dance or whatever. So that waitress, I'm telling you, within 6 months to a year, she's dancing. You know
Hmm.
what I'm saying? It's a progression. And then, within another 6 months to a year of that, she may have a guy who may be her sugar daddy, and now she's flying out to Vegas to go, be with him or whatever. And it just becomes a progression. And then 6 months to a year, maybe even after that, or sooner or a little bit after, now they're doing film. You know what I'm saying? Now they're doing pornography. They're in the films. And it's a progression, but it'll all start from just wanting to be a little waitress. You know what I'm saying? Coming
Yeah.
in, being naive.
I wonder what it says about culture too, that a movie like Anora, which is about that, wins awards, and in some ways it is criticizing, but then at the same time it's not, and it's kind of normalizing it. And I find that a bit troubling, even though I think like it's a great film and great filmmaker, but I'm thinking, what is the message you're trying to give here? And it just seems like in the film, for example, and it just seems like we need to kind of see things in a different way, in a more like what is really the right thing to do, or what's the moral thing, as you're saying. And
Yeah.
I don't feel that there is enough of that when I see things like this, films like this.
Hey, I would agree with you 100%. There's not morality has changed as we continue to push the boundaries just as
Hmm.
culturally or as a society, right? We just
Hmm.
keep
Hmm.
pushing it, and we don't have any boundaries because I, when the Bible talks about how the root to all evil could be money, right? Or it can be
Yeah.
money or is money,
Hmm.
right? It's or the love of money, right? It's
Hmm.
we don't realize that that's what we actually love, but it's partly because as a society we've created to where everything costs money, right? And
That's
you
right.
need it, and so then you start to do things, and once you've done one thing, once you've done it one time, like the girl, like the progression of the girl dancing,
Hmm.
she's seen when the waitress has seen the girl dance, and she's like, oh, that's it. And then she goes and talks to her back because they share, the same locker room or dressing room or right or whatever, right? She's like, oh, girl, it's easy. All you gotta do is do this and do that, and you get to be in control, and you can tell them when you know what I'm saying? Then that girl starts to see, oh, I can do that. And so then it's like, well, I need more money anyway. So if I can make more by doing less, essentially, you may be doing less physically, but mentally you're doing more
That's
because
right.
you're dealing with more.
Yeah, yeah. So you were always a believer. You used to go to church too at a younger age, and so I'm wondering, like, if was there any signs? Were there any like signposts as you coming along, like just kind of reminding you, it's like, hey, wait a minute, this, or did was it really the shift with the unexpected events that happened that brought you back to what's really important? Were there any kind of like incidents where you say, "Oh, I think this is like a higher force, like God or Jesus trying to tell me something," whether it's a dream or something somebody says. Was there anything throughout that you noticed, or how did it happen? With this like move for you to finding the right path, basically.
So yes, I grew up in church. I
Mhm.
was Kojic, so it was more like Pentecostal.
Okay.
And so there was a part of that was I didn't, I got baptized when I was a kid, and saved and wanted to be with Christ, then. But
Mhm.
only we didn't have like a Bible 101 back then. So I didn't, I mean, or discipleship 101 back then. So I didn't really know how to be a Christian, right? So
Mhm.
all I know is to watch the older saints and see what they did. And so throughout as I was growing up, I still love music, but I was able to compartmentalize. When I was
Oh,
in when I
that
was in
makes sense.
when I
Yeah.
was in college, I was
Mhm.
throwing parties, right, in
Mhm.
college, and so that didn't seem this progression for me too, right? So that didn't seem bad. I DJ'd a little bit, and then
Mhm.
before you know it, I was actually the producer producing parties and on the campus and stuff like that. But yes, there were several moments, and I write about them in the book. There were several moments that happened that where you could see God pulling at me, tugging at
Yeah.
me, right? So,
Exactly. Yeah.
excuse me. So even like one time I was on the road for Luke, and I was on my way home, and I was coming back. I was coming through Oklahoma City,
Mhm.
and that's when the Oklahoma City bombing happened. And that morning when the bombing happened, I was downtown Oklahoma City, and it felt like somebody was kicking in my door, right? Like that's how close I was or far I was from the bomb or when it happened. And that was a moment in my life where I was like, I went home and I said, I'm quitting. Like I'm not doing this anymore.
Yeah.
Like I want to do right. And I got baptized probably, I don't know, maybe less than a week after that. So I got baptized again. So the second time, because I guess I felt like I needed it. You
Sure.
and so yeah, there's different moments. There was moments where, dealing with some of the people, there was a moment where I had jewelry that was stolen from me.
Mhm.
Um, it's it was stolen, but it was like, you know what? I don't need to be dealing with these kind of people. It's the people I'm dealing with, but there was still always that pull because I wanted to do right with God. So I took my family to church. Sundays I was at church. So Sundays I could be Jerry, and then during the week I was JD, right?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
But
That
yeah,
kind of
there's
split.
definitely
Yeah.
moments.
And that's like that's not ideal. It's not healthy, for like emotionally and mentally as well, because you are being two different people according to
Yes,
the context.
yes,
And I think it's like, well, you can reach fame and so on, but if you're integrated, as long as you can, I mean, the music is wonderful, and that's something like, to pursue, but not falling into that trap of being sucked
right.
into that vortex, as we're saying.
It
Which is
was
very hard, by the way. I can imagine. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. And again, I'm in my 20s, man.
Yeah.
So think about this. I'm in my 20s, right? I'm in Dallas, right? And at that time in the 90s, Dallas was one of the hottest cities. The Cowboys won 3 Super Bowls in the 90s. The Stars won the Stanley Cup in the 90s, right? And then I had some of the best artists in the world. I had Jennifer Lopez, Destiny's Child, Will Smith, Snoop Dogg. I mean, I had top tier artists, and I'm when they're in my market, I'm with them. You know what I'm saying? So it's like, you moving around with these artists. And so not that you become like them, but you're with them so much, and that you kind of take on the ego. I mean, it's just
Yeah, it
so much.
absorbs, does it? Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
exactly. Yeah.
yes,
Yeah, you
exactly,
absorb that
exactly.
kind of energy. And I think like one thing I love like with Romans, when they become emperors and they feel like invincible, there's this phrase of memento mori, remember you will die. And like not just dying, but this doesn't last. But it's really a bubble or an illusion. At any moment it can burst. I mean, you can have somebody like Taylor Swift being booed, which is like when she's in their height, we could never imagine that. And that
Yeah.
all of us are human, and we need to consider that too. And I think that makes us also a bit frail, which is a good thing, because then we need like other kind of support too to get through the things.
Yeah. And it's interesting you say that because I didn't think that way when I was especially in the music industry. Like when I was in the industry, man,
Mhm.
it was euphoric. I was like, this will never end. Like, why
Yeah.
would I do anything different than this? I'm gonna always be doing this, right? I'm not
Yeah.
why would I leave the music industry, right?
Yeah.
And then things start to change, right? So the first thing that started to change in the music industry was Napster came, right?
Right.
Napster came along, and so now the labels are trying to figure out how to stop Napster versus how to embrace the digital age that's coming along, right? And so that's one way. And so then when digital comes, the physical product goes away. Well, when the physical product goes away, now the labels can't make as much money because you got to, if you remember, a CD might cost $1, $2 to make. Well, we sell them for 19.99, 25.99. You know what I'm saying? So we're
I
selling.
got ripped off for many years then.
Yeah, so there's a lot of margin in there,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
A lot of
I spent
margin
a
in there.
lot of
So
money
the
on
labels
CDs.
were able to pay a lot of money, and so we made good money. You know, saying we spent a lot of money. We had a lot of fun. I mean, my budget was literally just to entertain DJs, program directors, retail store owners. It was just to entertain them so that we could get price and positioning in the stores. It was so that we could get get the records played on the air. So we were doing that. So when all of that comes to the end, then they start making cuts because they can't keep giving you bonuses. We had bonuses that would go from and I was on, I won't say the low end, but I was a Southwest marketing manager, but we would have bonuses that would go from 10, 15,000 to 1,000, as the product went away, as the physical product went away, right? So um, I just never, if I had your mindset when I was in my 20s,
My
like,
podcast didn't exist back then. I'm sorry.
I know, right? I've been like, maybe I'd have done some
My
things a little
bad.
different, and maybe I wouldn't have transitioned to the adult entertainment stuff and the porn side of things
Mhm.
versus, staying in the music or just doing something else different.
But then again, I mean, that's the path, and you have second chances and you transformed. I mean, we gotta also look at the positive side of like there is always a chance to redeem yourself, to find the right path, to deal with those things. And in fact, sometimes it can actually help to propel you in something
Yes.
that's more fulfilling.
I would tell you this now that I'm in seminary. I
Hmm.
would tell you, and now that I have a clear vision
Hmm.
of my assignment, right?
Hmm.
I would tell you that all of the things that I went through in the music industry, all of the things that I went through in the adult entertainment industry, and then all of the things I did when I was consulting these small businesses has helped shape me so where I can see how those things are an
Exactly.
asset for me
Yeah.
now with my current assignment. So yes, I can appreciate it. But man, I went through times when it was some dark times where, I went through sad times
Hmm.
because, it's like, and if you read through the book, you'll see, I'm like, why Jesus? Like, why music?
Hmm.
Why porn? Why am I going through this? Why am I dealing with these people? I had this saying all the time. I love your people, God, but I hate relying on them.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? It's like, but yeah, I can appreciate it now.
Yeah, for me, it was also a wake-up call, and I went through the same process, except without the fun. You had way more fun than I did. But mine was just health. My health was deteriorating. I was obese. I was like diabetic. I had sleep apnea. And at one point, I said, no, I'm not going to continue this. This was like my wake-up call. It's like, I'm going to choose a different path. Didn't know how, didn't know what would happen. And that's like 7, 8 years after this. And now I've never felt better. And I feel like everything is transforming and changing. And I really pinpoint that moment where I said, no more. Now, what would be that moment for you? Was there like a specific moment you say, that's it? I'm gonna
I,
change a different path.
yes, yes, absolutely. So when I turned 50, I would say the real my realness and real changing of path, right, was when I turned 50. And that was, a few years ago. I went in for a quadruple bypass. I didn't know I was going to have a quadruple bypass. I was a little sick. I had a meeting set up with a friend of mine. We were going to meet. He was in the music industry and he kind of wanted some advice on some things. And I called him and said, "Man, I can't do the meeting. I just, I'm just gonna rest or whatever." And he came and he was like, "No, you sound horrible. Like, let me come get you. We go take you to the hospital." And I was like, "No, I just need to go get a little bag of fluid, right? Like, let me just go get a little IV bag and I'll be okay, right?" He says, "No, no, no, no. I'm gonna take you to the ER." So he takes me to the ER. I said, "But I don't want to be sitting here for 2 hours and then they just give me a bag of fluid." He said, "No, no, no. I know what to say to get you right in." So he talks to him. Anyway, boom, they get me right in. So I go in, but then they start, checking my heart, checking all my vitals and all of that. My blood pressure was up, my glucose was up. And so they took me in, they put me in a ICU. And while I was there, they started bringing things down. They ended up doing a stress test. I go in, they say, "Oh, you got some blockage." And I was like, "Oh." And so, but there was no beds available. So I had to sit in the hospital for 2 weeks,
Oh
right?
my
Before I
God.
could even have because they wouldn't let me go home because, it's like you got the blockage, like, you could die, right?
Yeah.
So I sat there for 2 weeks. And then on the way into surgery, I was like, "You know what, God, if this is it, this is it. I'm not ready to go because I didn't feel like I was right with God at that moment." You know what I'm saying?
Mhm.
And so I went in, I had the surgery. But after the surgery, when I came out of the surgery, it was while I still had the trach in, I kept hearing that song from Old Blue Eyes, Frank Sinatra, "I Did It My Way." I kept hearing that
Mhm.
song, kept hearing
Mhm.
that song,
Mhm.
hearing that song. And I said, "You know what, God? You gave me good fit first. My first 50 years was good." And so
Mhm.
I'm good with that. By the world standard, I had fun. I did a lot of things. I'm good. I said, whatever time you give me left, I'll spend my time working for you
Yeah.
and spreading the
Yeah.
gospel. So that was, I would say that was my real turning point.
Hmm. And all the previous stuff is the prep work for to that moment, right? And
Yeah.
then and it's good. I mean, I think it's all is well that ends well. You know, when you're like on the right path and you're happy and you're feeling fulfilled, that's really important. And again, it's the lessons are tough. We have to go through suffering. I had to go through suffering to get there, but
Yes.
I really appreciate it so much more now when I look at it. And it's like, yes,
Yes.
even like making
Yes.
mistakes, like, okay, that was wrong. Now I can do things better, right? And I think the amount of agency that we have and willpower, how important that is, instead of, defeating yourself or thinking you're not worthy. I mean, that's something, and
Yes.
we all are, no matter what we do and where we are. But we don't realize that often, I think.
Yeah. No, and to your point, we don't, that's why the gratitude is, it's
Hmm.
important to have it, but it
Hmm.
comes afterwards when you can reflect
Yeah.
back and you can reflect back and say, oh man, look at what I did go through. So I'm so grateful because God did, even as I'm going through it, I didn't have the thought of God's giving me mercy, right? Because I'm thinking this is horrible. Like this is
Yeah.
bad, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
But when I look back, I'm like, oh, it could have been a lot worse. So I'm
Right.
grateful for the mercy that God had on me because this whole thing could have been way worse than what it was. I mean, I could have came out with, you know, with any kind of dysfunction or whatever, right?
Yeah.
From my
Yeah.
brain or whatever,
Yeah.
right? Just from being in surgery or not came out at all. So, the gratitude, I agree with you 100%. The gratitude, but you don't see it until after the fact, right?
Yes. Yes. And that friend who was insisting to take you to the hospital, I mean, that's an angel there, an angel speaking through him, right? Because that saved your life, essentially.
Listen, God knew which one of my friends
Mhm.
to send because all my other friends, when I really look at this, all of my other friends would have just did what I asked them to do. They would have
Mhm.
just taken me, go
Mhm.
get a bag of fluid, and took me back to
Mhm.
my
Mhm.
house. Like that's what
Mhm.
they would have done because they like, oh well, you know your body, you know this. But he's the one friend that was not gonna do that. No
Mhm.
matter what, he was gonna like, dude, I'm taking you to the hospital. Like I'm taking you, and he made me go, and he took me, and I'm grateful, so grateful that he did.
So, what prompted you to write this book? Was it, again, you want to share what you've gone through, your lessons, your experiences with us, or is there anything else too that you want to do with your book? So, what's the motivation, and what do you hope will come out of it?
So there's two things.
Mhm.
There was there was always a there was a time period that came because in the book I think I talk about when I was young I started smoking weed when I was young, smoking marijuana when I was young,
Mhm.
and so then as I got older I had been to so many different shows and so forth, and I had taken friends and we had done some things, and there was friends that started asking me like, "Hey, you remember taking me to this show or this show?" Well, I had
Mhm.
one particular friend. She had we went to go see her cousin, and he was like, "Oh, do you remember da 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 this show I took him to?" And I honestly couldn't remember any of it. Like I don't even remember going with him. I don't remember any of it, and I thought to myself I need to at least start putting stuff on paper, right?
Yes.
So because there's things that I'm forgetting, and so it got to where I had friends that would have to show me photos that we took back then
Mhm.
that just for me to remember that I was there. Now I never told any of them this, right? So they don't know that I didn't remember it, but I knew that. So that was one thing, not so much as the book, but it was so much as I needed to start writing things down,
Mhm.
right? And then I had another friend who had came to me, and I'm just taking this as God. When I look back, I'm taking this as God now. He was just saying, "Hey, man, you've done some things, and some of your stories can help some people, right?" And I said, "Yeah, okay, I get it." He said, "You've been through, the music, the adult, and now you're in ministry, right?" I said, "Yeah, I get it." So there's that, and then it was like, okay, you know what? Maybe I can. Maybe someone can read this book and understand that the journey, as long as you're still alive, it's not too late. As
Mhm.
long as you're still breathing, you have an opportunity to still have salvation and eternity. And I'll tell you the probably the most um refreshing and I'll say encouraging. I don't know really the right word was I've had some people that have read the book that were close to my mom actually, and they called. And one lady in particular, she said she has hope for her son because whatever the road that he's going down right now is not right. But her just reading my story and seeing how you can be not going right, and then you can get on the right road when you finally answer that call from God.
Well, I hope you reach fame with your book, and that's actually a different kind of fame. It doesn't have a downside, and you won't fall into that trap again now. And
Yeah,
thank you so
no.
much, Jerry Dale, for JD, for being on Arash's World. And I just want to
Thank
remind
you.
everyone, your book is Music, Porn, and Jesus: A Journey to Redemption. Love the title. Great job doing this book, and such a pleasure
Thank you.
talking to you.
Thank you.